Welcome to another OCD Recovery Instagram Live. I'm going to be covering questions and answers on here again today because I haven't done a poll this week or any other Q&As, so I thought I would cover all your questions on here. Anything you want to ask in relation to OCD, just post it in the comments below and I will cover those now. What was I going to talk about? First of all, I wanted to talk a bit about the post that I wrote earlier that was talking about sensations. So in relation to sensations, what happens is we're so used to not wanting to feel a certain sensation, not wanting to experience it. So when we do experience it, when we do feel it, we want to get rid of that sensation. We don't like it. It feels horrible. It feels like a chronic anxiety, a chronic guilt, something like that. And so we get into a habit of trying to get rid of that all the time. And then what happens is with future fears, we want to try and work out the future to get it all controlled nicely so that we know where we are with the future situation, so that we don't feel out of our comfort zone, so everything feels safe, so we sort of frantically chase into the future. And then we do the same with the past. We frantically chase into the past to check if anything was out of place there or anything's dangerous there, that we didn't want it to be there. And OCD knows that, so it's going to trigger into the future. So what if this is to happen? And it's going to trigger into the past. What if that did happen? And then it will also trigger in the current moment with this sensation is very scary, I need to get away from that. Or if you've done that now, that makes you bad now or wrong or terrible, whatever thing it wants to latch to right in the present. So it's going to move around there. It's good to have an understanding of that sort of latching. I mean, someone could just be parking a car and then see a woman with a pushchair on the other side of the street, and in that split second it can latch and go, well, you just tried to kill her, or you didn't think of that quick enough 1 second ago. So it will create a quick latching of a second behind. But that feels instant, so you couldn't have actually gone a second quicker. What's actually happened is it's latched into the past with a sensation that you could have. So you couldn't have. The same as with the thoughts ones where, I can't have that thought, I should have not had that just then. The way it latches feels like there's a second delay, but there actually isn't. You couldn't have changed that situation in any particular way. And that's important to have an understanding of that, because that's one of its cunning tricks that it's going to pull all the time. Same with the false memory ones. You've been going along your life fine, not worried about something, and then boom, it zooms back at the age of 12, around sexual development, says, did you do this? Did you see this? Did you ask this? And then it sort of latches in there. So it's going to do lots of different things where it can see, and it will create that sensation where it's going to feel as real as it can get. Because if it didn't feel real, it wouldn't be the disorder it is. It has to feel real, otherwise it wouldn't have much grip. It's very important to remember that, because otherwise what happens with all these things is we think, mine's different because of how real mine feels. This one's different from the other ones, but it isn't different from the other ones. It's got to feel like that. If for example, OCD in relation to feeling like you're gay didn't feel like you were gay, you wouldn't have a problem. If OCD in relation to health didn't make you feel like you thought you actually had the disease, or you'd done something in the past that you believe is very wrong, it's not going to, you just brush it off as nothing. So it has to create that sensation to feel as real as it can possibly get. That's exactly what it does. That's its very nature, and that's why it gets that sort of latched grip. Okay, let's have a look at some of these questions. So any questions you want to ask in relation to your OCD, please put them in the comments below and I will cover them. What are some examples of our OCD exposures? I don't like to go into exposures broadly because things have to be tailored specifically to the person's particular problem. And so then what will happen if I give some answers, people just go and try those, and it doesn't work like that. They have to be tailored specifically in relation to the fear. Can HOCD make you disgusted of the gender you thought you were attracted to? Yes, because it can make, this is a reassurance question, because it's trying to check, it can do and latch to anything. So it's trying to go for the things that you value, the goals that you're going towards, and it's trying to intervene and latch in there. And it's also, so if you care about, say for example, you might think in your head, I want to be straight because that means I have the life I want, as in having a family, children, and so on. So if I was gay, it would ruin all of that. So then it's going to create that sensation. But that doesn't even make sense, that statement, at all. Because if you were gay, you wouldn't care about having a relationship with a woman and having a baby with a woman, because you would be content with what you've got as a man, with a man. So what it does is, these things don't follow any patterns. They're just trying to latch to pull you away from the thing you value. It's just an anxiety response, because the thing you value, you're scared of losing. So it goes, oh, what about this? And then it latches in there. Let's have a look here. Harm OCD will convince you of anything, to do the thoughts, like you did the thoughts, like you want the thoughts, all of the above. Do I still do exposures? No, not really. There's never a thing where it gets stuck and I need to exposure, because my brain and me understand and aware that can see that it doesn't need to get in there. That like I've done so many exposures in the past, I can see how it works. It's never really a case. But I'll tell you where humans do have cases. Like, for example, if you took most people in a sort of bar setting, I'm not talking about in relation to COVID times, but in a bar setting, and then you said, right, go and, without alcohol, go and speak to that group of girls that are on the other side of the bar and just walk over there. Most men would not want to do that because they would think, what if I get turned down by all of them? It will be a crushing feeling. Now, if I was to do that, there's no anxiety in doing that. And that's often a shame-attacking exercise that can be used, which is very good. Albert Ellis talks about it when he was in the Bronx Botanical Gardens. He used this exercise to get over his fear of speaking to women. And that was one of his first shame attacks he did, by speaking to lots of women in the Bronx Botanical Gardens. So yeah, that sort of shame attack exercise. If I went and did, say someone said to me right now, okay, go over there in the middle of the day and speak to that group of women that are sitting on a table having a drink in the day, no alcohol. The first bit, I'm going to feel that anxiety. All humans will feel that, because it's going to come on at first. And then once I've pushed over it and done it, and once I see it and I've done it, that habit will turn down. There'll be no anxiety. So that's what will happen. Now, once I've done it, I could then do it 10, 20 times straight after the same day with no anxiety at all. But it just depends. You have to get into that. You have to just cross that barrier. So that would be an example where I would still notice that anxiety initially, even though my brain knows what's the worst that they can say. Nothing's going to be damaging, but your brain still does revert to sort of protect you there. So that would happen. I mean, those are common good shame attacking exercises. Doing that in a bar, for example, talking to people, asking people out, and then doing it in the daytime. Daytime is more challenging because people think, well, I could get turned down more, and or it will be harder without alcohol and so on. And a lot of people, I mean, that's where the whole alcohol situation comes in bars and so on, because it's groups of people, so they feel less scared to talk to other people, and then with alcohol they feel less scared, and that's the setting. But once you do it in the day, sort of just going to speak to somebody like that feels worse at first. And those things in sort of social anxiety can hold a lot of people back. I mean, people come in that find it very hard to talk to the opposite sex, to the extent that they barely meet anyone because they're so scared of being rejected. And there's various ways that they can build up to doing that, so they can see that it's not scary. And then when they overcome that, they get so much confidence, because they realize actually the worst that can happen is someone says no. Actually hearing someone say no is actually the good thing, because then they realize that's the worst that can happen, and then they don't care. But then OCD will also latch, and so does social anxiety in those settings will latch and say, oh, but what happens if I hear no loads? Then that means I'm no good and I'm worthless, and then we have to demonstrate unconditional self-acceptance. Makes sense here. Unconditional self-acceptance. You're still valuable. Just because you get rejected in a dating setting doesn't mean you lose your value. I mean, you can then change certain things to give you a better chance in that scenario, so that then you do realize that, oh, those things improve it. It's not you. I mean, for example, somebody who is having a lot of problems talking to people, might come across nervous, but once they've learnt to then calm down, their then possibility of meeting someone in a relationship then improves. So loads of factors change. It's not them as being no good. So that's very important. I mean, dating and sort of a life, it very much connects into anxiety and sort of shame attacking and all of that stuff. And that was where some of the Albert Ellis shame attacks I first used in those settings, because they were easy to recreate. Speaking to people in the day and asking them out and so on, because I knew that would feel shame. And then obviously it got to a point where it didn't matter where anyone was or whatever, I could speak to them in any situation. And then I realised the anxiety come down, and then I did other shame attacking exercises. That I did all the ones that different ones that he suggested, much more challenging than that. Like the walking banana one, I found particularly challenging. One of the exercises that Albert Ellis talked about, where it's not necessary, it doesn't need to be done for OCD recovery. It's only in certain situations it's advisable, where somebody, for example, is so scared of being rejected or rejected by society. So taking a banana for a walk on a string like it's a dog down the street, you would think, oh God, everyone's going to think I'm out of a mental hospital, I'm completely lost the plot. And so I did that, and then saw, well, actually people nobody noticed. Then when people did notice, some laughed, some pointed it out, some thought it was weird, but I didn't die. So I realised it wasn't the end of the world if I got rejected, and so on. And then I did it in a more difficult setting, in a setting where it was a sort of evening setting where everyone was dressed up and out for a night out, and then did it, and so that I could feel the rejection of people that I might be trying to get approval, and then I got into that, and then so that was that one. Then things like what other shame attacks did I do? Stopping someone in the street and saying, hi, can you tell me what day of the week it is? I've just come out of a mental health hospital. And the person's looking at you like, God, this guy's very strange. Get into my fear of sort of going crazy and so on. These were all targeted in a very safe manner. So obviously these were planned. These are not recommendations I'm telling you just to go out and do. These were all sort of planned out carefully. But you can see in the Albert Ellis books how those are approached. And I did those. Those ones got into it. What other ones did I do that were challenging? Various ones in relation to asking for embarrassing things in shops. That was a good one. Like, let me think of some that I did. Oh yeah, going into a pharmacy and saying to them, excuse me, can you tell me what the smallest condoms you have in here are that are available for sale? And then just sort of seeing the guy's face on the pharmacy look at me in sort of a bit of shock, and then realising, well, that wasn't actually that bad. All that's happened is he's looked at me with shock. And you know, they seem funny, but actually, if you think about it, you're not actually doing anything there that's dangerous or wrong, because some people might have to ask for something like that. And if you go in and do that, you realise that the world doesn't end. And what other ones? Versions of those things, just funny things that you would create. That can, you can pick these and design these for all different types of fears. So, for example, that was for a fear of social rejection, which was subtly latched in the background. Then you've got ones like counting out money very slowly in a coffee shop, so that people are getting wound up in the queue before, so you're seeming a bit stupid, a bit of a sort of clumsy, a bit not so on the ball. That one got in on that, sort of just being a nuisance, not wanting to be that. And then OCD, most anxiety stems from a position of certain fears that people have. It exaggerates. That fear may be somebody being scared of being rejected, for being not attractive enough, someone might have. So then they could wear clothes that they didn't like. They thought that they would get rejection if they wore those kind of clothes. Then it might be being some kind of loser, the concept of loser. So acting in a way that maybe people would think how they perceive being a loser. And doing all these things so that they realise that the world doesn't end. These exercises, they're very they can be designed to get into core fears very subtly and cleverly. At first they might seem like sort of in the modern day sort of social experiment YouTuber type world as sort of funny things that you see done. But when it comes to anxiety, they target things very carefully. Like somebody, say for example, that condom exposure that sounds stupid at first, in terms of not sounds stupid, but it just sounds a bit comical. But then when you actually review it and think about what's the theory behind it, well, the theory behind it is this. Most people wouldn't want to ask for that because they feel that they might get sort of a ridiculed look, or the person will think of them in a strange manner. So that's the first thing. Then the other thing about it is that they get scared that other people might notice, or that they will just sort of, the ground will swallow them up because it will be such a strange thing to ask for that people will really look at them as weird, and they sort of pit their stomach feels bad. And that really got into that because it's not many, no one's going to really so let me just adjust the screen here, getting used to the new Instagram settings. So nobody's going to look, if you take, when people come to see me and talk about anxiety and different things that it's latched to, they will often say, Rob, I'm not scared of anything really, no exposure. I do silly things all the time when I'm out with my mates. Nothing would embarrass me, right? Okay, that's what I originally thought, but it was actually very subtly in there in different ways. So originally I thought, I don't mind being seen as a fool, but you do. It's on your terms of how you're being seen. So when it actually is things that you don't want to look like so people often then say, oh well, can I bring a friend along? Because then it's just sort of funny. No, because that's reflecting from the impact feeling on you, because they're there as support. The same as why groups of lads go out on a night out together. They wouldn't want to do it on their own because they're scared of the social rejection again. So what happens is with those shame attacking exercises, they are exercises that they don't need to be used that often, but they're often very beneficial for certain things. If someone comes into me and they're so scared of being socially rejected, it's quite simple to set up scenarios that will get into those fears subtly. So maybe, and this is very much the case for a lot of people, but they just don't realise it initially. But things like, for example, even in social rejection, walking down the street and finding a woman or a man that you think is attractive, and going and asking them, excuse me, can you tell me where the nearest Starbucks is? Now, just going to do that, people are often scared of that because they think, well, what if the person thinks that was me trying to chat them up? And they'll be scared, terrified, I can't do that. But once they've done that a few times, which is a harmless exercise, that chips into that, and they say, actually not too worried about that. But social anxiety, let's get this straight here. Social anxiety is something that people get they get so disturbed by it. They can't even text on WhatsApp. They can't even speak to the opposite sex. They get so scared of saying something wrong. They've completely locked up in themselves, unable to sort of move too much out of that position. So you have that. So then you go further up the scale. So starting like a Starbucks sort of suggestion. And bear in mind, I'm not suggesting, I know when someone asked earlier about what exposures for RSD, these aren't things that I'm suggesting go out and do. I'm talking about when I'm specifically working with someone, what things we can do to adjust to breaking down fears, which is just parts of normal human life. They're not scary as in of themselves. They're only scary because of our perception of them. So, and then the person, you say, right, well, why don't you go and speak to that girl in the perfume section, for example, in a shop, and just talk to her a bit longer than you would talk to her if you were buying perfume. They might not like that. They'll think, oh, that's very scary. And so then it builds up so they can get to a point where they can actually ask somebody out, or they can interact better socially with friends. Now, this is vital because these things people don't realise are so crucial in life and hold people back so much, because if they don't If they're limited in meeting the opposite sex or the same sex or whatever, their life feels held back. They feel like they're missing opportunities. They feel like they're not living the same as other humans. There's a lot of that going on. So it's very important for them to overcome those fears, to get under that, because it gives them so many more opportunities. And I often thought that when I was younger, I thought, well, think about the number of times that somebody passes you, or somebody that you could meet, that you don't, because you think now's not the time, or you feel that sense of anxiety or whatever, and then that blocks that interaction. Well, what about if you could take all those opportunities because you weren't scared of it, because nothing bad could happen, and then I just adjusted that and made sure that I did in all those situations, and you realise that nothing happens. Humans interact with each other, and the worst that someone says is, I'm busy, I'm going, or whatever, but the amount it builds up in our heads is a different level. So that's very important. I will actually do a video talking all about that, relationships, dating, sort of interaction, social anxiety in online and in physical, seeing somebody in person, because that is where so much social anxiety is connected, and people are getting stuck like that. People do stay in comfort zones now, especially with the modern world, with online dating. It's nice and comfortable. Okay, I've got my picture, I've got my write-up about myself. Okay, I can reject this, and I can say this, and I can meet them for a coffee, and then I don't have to meet them if I don't want to, and I can make it all nice and comfortable. But it's building a scenario where people aren't used to interacting as well face-to-face. They're so used to behind the phone, which is a nice sort of safe boundary. And you often see that. You'll see people talking in sort of WhatsApp settings or social online settings, but then when it comes to interacting in real life, they're very different, because they lose that comfort zone. So that's very important. And so I will cover that in an individual video on that. It's gone a little bit off topic today. I wanted to talk about those, and I will, but I was doing a question and answers, so I'm going to go back to where I was with those questions. Can disputing beliefs become compulsive? Yes, if you're doing too much disputing of irrational beliefs, it very much can become compulsive. If you want to keep it to sort of a set amount of time, so you're not overdoing it, and it's not something you're trying to fight off the thoughts or fight off the anxiety with, just endlessly going over it, trying to force it away. It's not something like that. You're not trying to do that. So you do, like with everything, need to approach it with a balance. Can OCD involve urges? Yes, a bit of a reassurance question, but the reason I cover it is because people often forget that the urges do play a significant part. It's not just thoughts, because often people talk about thoughts, but not so much about urges. Okay, let's have a look here. Past themes that you got over in dreams. Well, dreams mean nothing. They're the same as thoughts. They just feel more real. That's what happens. So often people commit crimes, murders, sexual harm in their dreams, and wake up, oh my God, how did I do that? Well, it's because dreams are like thoughts. You can just, and it's out of your control. So it releases when you do that, when you get under the thoughts, but also often when they don't unlatch in a dream scenario, working towards unconditional self-acceptance from the teachings of Albert Ellis through through REBT, learning the sort of the principles that he talks about there, but it's not just in that; it's in so many other aspects of life, unconditional self-acceptance, and once you see that, then it doesn't matter what you've done in your thoughts or whatever, because you can accept yourself and ground yourself back to that position of peace. But often with dreams will cause conflict for people, especially now, as you see so many people talking about, how to understand your dreams, and dreams mean this and dreams mean that. It becomes very, very confusing. So the unconditional self-acceptance gets under it regardless, but initially they are just thoughts that are happening when you're not awake. In relation to that guilt question, we've got a lot of guilt videos on the YouTube channel. So if you go on the YouTube channel and check that out, there's tons of guilt videos. There's good ones on there by Oliver, who's talking all about his experience with chronic guilt. So yeah, go on there and check those out. What's the difference between reassurance and disputing irrational beliefs? Reassurance is to get a subtle feeling, a quick feeling of relief to get away from a feeling. Disputing irrational beliefs is breaking down why something is irrational, as it doesn't make scientific sense. There's no evidence for it. It's completely made up in our head. It's not reality based. So breaking that down is very different. But like in relation to the question before, we need to be careful that we're not doing it in a compulsive manner. If my therapist isn't doing ERP, should I get a new one? Well, ERP is a gold standard exposures, which is just basically facing fears, seeing things in life for what they are, and seeing that they, in reality, are not. It's not scary. That fear is an illusion. But exposure is not always needed for OCD. There's a huge emphasis on it. Of course, it is needed in a lot of cases, but it's not always needed. Often the person's disturbance is caused more through their belief systems, and it's looking at that. Depending on your situation, yes, having a therapist that understands exposures would be better for sure. But the fact that they don't do that probably means that they also don't necessarily have that great an understanding of OCD being the gold standard and all. So yes, it would probably be a good idea to get a second opinion. Please help, I'm scared of any time I can't concentrate. Well, why is it so scary if you can't concentrate? Not everyone's can concentrate fully at all times. So you need to look at that, because it means that you believe it means you're losing control or not going to be able to do your things that you want to accomplish and so on. So it's probably getting in there. That question in relation to porn addiction and sexual thoughts, that's all the same as fear of harm, well, it's actually kind of a health OCD as well, fear of addiction. But you need to break that down and look at the irrational beliefs. There's a lot of people with addictions that live life fine. They function for a long time and they get it under control and so on. And then we need to also work towards accepting the worst case scenario. What even if we didn't get that under control, and looking at where that fear gets in there, the core fear too, because it often might be, I'll end up homeless, I'll end up in jail or whatever. Looking at those elements too. I have thoughts of harming. It tells me to harm. I say no, but it says, what if you have to do it and this is the meaning of life? Well, yes, that's a common one. That's the same as what people often feel with other OCD aspects, where it tries to link your fear to other things. Oh, if you don't do this, then this will happen. It's all of the same thing. It's just OCD trying to scare you with another sort of latched cycle where it's saying the only way out is ... But that's never the case. Same as if you don't say this or click your fingers or stand on that, then this will happen. In relation to taboo-themed OCDs, again, Oliver has done some videos on taboo-related OCD on our YouTube channel, if you check that out. Is there people without intrusive thoughts? All humans have intrusive thoughts, except with OCD, the nature of how intrusive they feel is different. With them, it will just feel like a normal thought that just comes in out of nowhere. But with us, it feels like a sort of intrusive bullet into our brain. That's what it kind of feels like when suffering from OCD, not in recovery. In relation to sensory motor OCD and somatic OCD, you want to check out Nick's videos on our channel. He's done some great ones all on somatic OCD in detail, and it's a topic, sensory motor and somatic, that very rarely do I ever see covered properly online. So we wanted to put quite a lot of work into making sure that we had captured all of those angles and elements that sensory motor OCD tries to get into and latch on. Just going through these questions. I can't answer all of the questions, obviously, because there's quite a lot of them, but I do try and pick the main ones. How is it that we have these thoughts when we know they're irrational? Well, because although you know they're irrational, you don't want them to be there. That's what's causing the problem. Because you don't want them to be present, that's what's giving them the weight. If you did, that's specifically what's making them latch. Not wanting them. Why am I having these? Suddenly I wasn't having these last week. Now they've just come in. I don't know why that's happening to me. And that kind of stuff is what the cycle is involved in the cycle, because you're so used to not wanting complete calm and no thoughts to intrude, and I just don't want any thoughts coming in here because they're upsetting my day and how I like to feel inside, but they don't. I couldn't care less if thoughts were there. The thoughts being there is not the issue. It's the rejection of them that's the issue. You've got to leave that sort of internal weather in your head alone and not keep trying to get rid of it or stir it up. That's what's causing the problem. It's you constantly trying to get rid or trying to balance it and change it and playing along with the sort of thermometer dial in your head, and that's what's causing the problems. Okay, let's have a look here. Can you talk about the illusion of going back to how I was before OCD? Well, you are as you were before OCD. You haven't changed. Your brain's not broken. All that's happened is you've become anxious. You've got scared. You've got some sort of anxiety cycle that's going on there, which is basically fear of something. You're exactly as you ever were. There's nothing broken. Nothing has changed. You are perfectly intact as you are. It's easy to think you're not because you've been in this cycle that feels disturbing. So you think, why wasn't I feeling like this last year or 2 years or 10 years ago? And that's what the cycle is. So it's important to see that and observe that, because otherwise we can feel very lost and stuck in our head, like, I'm never going to get out of this. I'm stuck in this forever. My life's never going to be the same. And then constantly chasing to before you got it, because you remember at that time before you didn't feel bad. So you think, if I can only just get back there, then I will be fine. But it doesn't work like that. You'll never hear of someone on my page saying, I just got back to how I was by thinking to be just like that, and then boom, back there. It's not how it works. Work through the process, through the theory and what we're learning for the recovery journey, and the tools that gets us into a position where today we can be comfortable with how we are and break down those anxious cycles, and then we don't feel trapped and we're perfectly intact. I'm not longing to be any way like I was in the past. Certainly wouldn't. The whole journey has taught me things that I would have never learnt had I not been through this experience. So it's been hugely beneficial to me. So going back to before would be a disadvantage, and we can't go back anyway. Every second is another second of our lives on the conveyor belt of life. So it's very much like that. Can you recommend any books? Yes, please check out our website, ocdrecovery.com, and if you look at the reading list on there, it's got all the reading that I recommend for OCD recovery. Let's have a look if there's any last questions. How do you deal with false memories when you have ruminated so much that you've created scenarios? The only reason those scenarios bother you is because of your perception of those scenarios. There's no scenario in the past, whatever it involves, harm of any sort, that would detract from me accepting myself and being at peace with myself. So doesn't matter what is there, whether it's real, whether it's not, it's irrelevant. It's only a problem when I fear it and I think it's the scariest thing ever because of my irrational beliefs, my exaggerated view of that scenario. The same as when I was just talking about the dating scenario. The worst that can happen is someone says no. It's not that scary. And even if they said no and they didn't like you, that doesn't detract from your value. Okay, guys. I am going to speak to you and cover more of these questions and answers on the next Instagram Live, which will be up in a few days' time. I wanted to come on here and do a video soon because when I was, the last couple of weeks, I've been very busy, so I hadn't done as many videos, so I'm going to be back on here, and I will be back doing another questions and answers later into next week. Guys, great to see you all. Please check out the YouTube channel if you haven't already, and please subscribe. We're trying to build that into a big sort of OCD channel that covers all the stuff that your concerns in relation to OCD, and it's all free, so that people have all the resources that they need when they're stuck wherever they are in the world. We're going to be translating into lots of different languages. We're going to be doing other channels for specifically for other regions around the world, so people get all the information they need on OCD. And that's going to be the next big steps we're taking this year, because we realise that so many people don't understand OCD in English, let alone in other countries. So you can imagine what it's like in some countries where they've got no resources in their language. So we're going to be doing a lot of that. Guys, great to see you all, and I will see you on the next question and answers. Take it easy. Bye.